I have BJ Scott as my guest here. How did you end up in Kickfurther?
B2B world of advertising honestly has a lot of opportunity to steal from the D2C world. The brands that do the best in that space are those that sell like consumers.
One of the reasons that brands fail is that they don't have enough resources, financial resources to support their growth. And so that's why platforms like Kickfurther comes in and solves that very, very painful problem that I'm pretty sure 99% of the e-commerce brands face.
Current or the historical structure for how capital has been, it's kind of a vicious cycle. And then another one of the larger competitive models that I've personally seen is the merchant cash advance model, fintech industry, and kind of get ourselves better associated there, considering alternative investments in those types of communities. That's seemingly been, we're seeing the best traction for that side of the business. So it's almost two totally different approaches to the market.
So, hey everyone, today is a very special day for me because I am told I have BJ Scott as my guest here. I'm told he's one of the most charismatic and apparently good looking people in Kickfurther, who's one of our partners here at Xena. He has had a fascinating career, largely revolving around e-commerce, but mostly into buyer journeys and digital marketing. So his unique perspective comes from the point of view not just marketing to the ICPs around e-commerce sellers, but also since Kickfurther is a platform, also working with or rather targeting or attracting the investor community in the form of family offices or even retail investors as well. So thank you so much for taking the time, BJ, to be to having a small conversation with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I see the Design Pickle logo in the background. I know you worked for them for a while. How did you end up in Kickfurther?
Yeah, so Design Pickle is a creative brand, and I spent a lot of time with them, kind of scaling their SaaS business. And I think for me personally, it was the exposure to creativity that really kind of launched my time here with Kickfurther. I think Design Pickle taught me a lot about how the B2B world of advertising honestly has a lot of opportunity to steal from the D2C world. I think as business to business marketers, we tend to believe we've got to be a little more buttoned up. But the brands that do the best in that space are those that sell like consumers, because at the end of the day, the purchase decision is made by a single individual. So, my experience with Design Pickle was awesome. We saw growth to a point at which I was ready to take on a new challenge, and I think Kickfurther was the perfect opportunity there to kind of enter somewhat of a fintech e-com space, but to do so from a lens that borrows from the creativity and the opportunities kind of inherent in being creative.
Speaking of Kickfurther, by the way, Kickfurther has been a fantastic partner for us. They obviously have a very strong community. Shout out to Molly, who has built a very strong partnership ecosystem as well. And I know for a fact, just to give a description, Kickfurther is a platform that helps in funding requirements for fast growing and promising e-commerce brands. And one of the things, since at Xena we do work with lots of e-commerce brands, one of the reasons that brands fail is that they don't have enough resources, financial resources to support their growth when the time is correct. They usually they're unable to get access to fast liquid capital through traditional means like banks. And often they have to dip into their own personal resources. Some of them don't have the luxury to do that. And so that's why platforms like Kickfurther comes in and solves that very, very painful problem that I'm pretty sure 99% of the e-commerce brands face. So you have been around in Kickfurther for a year and a half at this point. You also mentioned in a private conversation earlier that you have seen things evolve with time within the organization, within the e-commerce community. I'd love to know more.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, even in my short year here at Kickfurther, I've seen a lot across the industry shift. And I think the biggest kind of takeaway that I've experienced today is really just the fact that there's not a lot of public understanding of the breadth of ways that brands are able to generate that growth capital. There's some traditional means, right? Your traditional banks have always kind of been around and they've been offering loans, and we would argue here at Kickfurther that those loans tend to have some predatory terms associated. And I don't know that those the current or the historical structure for how capital has been raised by scaling CPG brands has tended to be almost like a it's kind of a vicious cycle. Typically, the traditional means what typically happens is folks will receive a purchase order, a growth opportunity, right? Something that we should be excited for as a brand. And we look at our books and we look at our existing working capital and we realize, okay, maybe this order would take, 70% of our working capital simply to get, manufactured and shipped. And it's our biggest opportunity. Maybe it's a larger retailer that we've been trying to, get our foot in the door with, and they want 200 units of our product. And, we've got to get it manufactured. We've got to get it shipped. We've got to get it housed, warehoused, and ultimately sold. And the time frame from the point that this purchase order is received by us as a brand and the time that we actually recognize the revenue, that may be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 9 months sometimes, right? Sales cycles, they vary. So in traditional means, most brands would look at kind of three primary options, right? You get a loan from the bank, which is going to require, regardless of what you sell through and when your sales cycle is, that you pay back at a structured time, at a structured pace, regardless of any snafus as it may relate to, your supply chain, et cetera. You've signed on the dotted line. Other options obviously are dilutive, right? We could go and get some additional capital we can raise capital by way of diluting the business and, affording ownership of the company in exchange for working capital. Obviously, that comes to a point of diminishing returns as you continue to scale. And then one of the larger kind of competitive models that I've personally seen kind of pop up a lot more here is the merchant cash advance model. And what I fear with that model is I think in the early stages of becoming exposed to the option, somewhat attractive, right? I'm able to, sell my receivables, if you will, that are associated with this purchase order at a discounted rate and recognize this capital up front. When I receive that capital, I'm paying back a portion of it, but I'm doing so before I actually recognize it, right? And that's the challenge is I'm foregoing growth at a discounted price. And therefore, once I recognize this revenue, I kind of find myself back into this vicious cycle. So I think one of the biggest takeaways I've seen kind of just across the lay of the land is that there's a huge appetite for a model like ours. And the reason being is because we are seller focused, we are founder focused. So Kickfurther will pay for your purchase order up front, and we don't want to see any payment in return for that payment of your product until you begin recognizing revenue. So what that does is it unlocks that working capital, and we harken back to that initial kind of case that I was describing. Those 200 units of product that are going to take 70% of my working capital, that now gets passed to Kickfurther. I'm able to now market this product. I'm able to now promote the fact that, hey, we are in this larger retailer. I'm able to grow at a faster rate, and I'm not taking my working capital and sacrificing growth because of which. I've just seen that as the merchant cash advance model starts to grow, the appetite for tooling and services like ours is also growing. It's just that the awareness kind of lacks. So that's why, we're doing our best to scream from the top of the roof, hey, Kickfurther is almost like vegetables, where, your MCA, your merchant cash advance is almost, your fast food, right? It's not sustainable. It's not healthy. It may solve a quick problem, but you're ultimately chasing after your tail in the long run.
Got it. Speaking of shouting from the top of your roof and putting on the marketing hat
Yeah.
for a moment, you obviously are the director of marketing for Kickfurther. Since it's a platform, you have to cater marketing efforts or outreach efforts to two distinct set of communities.
Right.
So in your day-to-day job as a marketing director, how do you focus, or where do you choose to focus your efforts on these two sets of people who use the platform? And how do you distinguish yourself on the best way to do that outreach within these two?
Yeah. So on both sides of the platform, in order for us as a marketing organization to achieve the desired outcome, that primary conversion, whether that's from the marketplace side, putting dollars onto a co-op, or from the brand side, signing up to gain access into the platform and then performing your first co-op, providing us with your first purchase order, both of which the ultimate conversion requires a human touch point. So our marketing organization is very much a lead gen org, not so much a direct response org. And I think that has been a shift that we've kind of experienced in our time as we've promoted Kickfurther. We kind of historically had been set up more of as a direct response organization. Here's an ad, here's a promotion. We'll deliver you to a landing page, and on which there's a form with minimal copy that will provide you with a little bit of background about what you're signing up for. But where we ran into challenges were there's not enough awareness of this model, right? So what we've leaned into is really being specific about mapping out the journey all the way out to awareness. We may not even recognize you on our site at this point, but we leverage a number of tools, whether it's through the third parties that we actually advertise through, or some of the analytics tools that we have over top of our excuse me, content, to understand, hey, if you interacted with an ad on this site, whether or not you click to our website, that is an indication of interest. And at least I can understand that you have some semblance of awareness, and where they're going to lean into the message that you've indicated that interest into. We've ultimately just had to extend the marketing message far beyond what it had been historically. And that's really an ongoing process for us on the brand side.
Mhm.
On the marketplace side, we've actually kind of shifted our focus, right? Historically, especially when a majority of that marketplace was funded by kind of that retail buyer, we could go to market with far more kind of traditional means of acquiring an ICP, your paid channels, your email channels, et cetera. But we've kind of shifted that model, and we're going more kind of to, like I said, more established investment groups. And that has become more of a one-to-one outreach, almost a BDR related type of engagement, right? Not even BDR, I would say more of a business development senior type of rep, where we kind of engage in really the fintech industry and kind of get ourselves better associated there, considering alternative investments in those types of communities. That's seemingly been where we've seen the best traction for that side of the business. So it's almost two totally different approaches to the market.
So could be an interesting challenge for you.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. And I will say, I think as we've started to focus more on the larger groups on the marketplace side, I think you see a lot more outcomes from few. So it's almost a one to many, if you will, which requires less volume, just more quality. And to be frank, a majority of our efforts from a marketing investment standpoint and otherwise have been on the brand side, to continue to acquire the brands, to continue to deliver that awareness, capture that demand, and ultimately get folks onto the platform.
Got it. And talking of buyer journey specifically, let's
Yeah.
just assume that I am a very successful brand. I have a product that is selling more than I thought it would. I have the backend logistics mostly figured out. My working capital is almost all of it is tied up in different stuff that is located, and I have run out of money to acquire more products quickly. So
Yeah.
if for those brands, which is I think most of the brands out there, how would their buyer journey, or rather, how would their user experience look like working with Kickfurther?
Yeah, so we are because we are deploying dollars from a marketplace that are not ours. There's a
Mm,
very strong underwriting process, if you will, that excuse me, that we put our brands through before they're able to access the marketplace.
mm,
That is, in an effort to protect the dollars of those that are being deployed. So the process is pretty simple up until the point that, well, comparatively speaking, it's a very simple process to very similar and common process to most financial kind of environments, right? You would speak with a rep, a salesperson after indicating interest. We've gone through the awareness process. We've captured your demand. You've expressed interest by way of either filling out a form or saying that you'd like to speak with someone, scheduling a call. We would kind of have a chat with you, understand the necessity of the brand, both with your upcoming needs and then kind of a broader, bigger picture. What does the next couple of months or quarters look like? What are your expected needs from an inventory standpoint? And then we dive into the specifics of, what is the volume of products that you're going to need? At what point do you expect to sell through them? What is your price point on each product? And as we get through those details, what is produced as we kind of work through that process is essentially a kind of a pre-approved report that then our team will take and assess. against, so the brand would provide us with financial information, any of the details around their suppliers and any other kind of, participants within their supply chain. We then would evaluate that, assess a level of risk essentially, and that risk assessment will determine whether or not you have access to the platform, and then the rates at which the cash that we're able to deploy to your products, the rates of buyer profit that you will be required to pay back to the buyers. So that those variables are all based off of a risk assessment. And I think, we talked about how things have shifted personally since I've joined Kickfurther. I will say that that part has been the biggest shift, is what risk is defined as. And obviously, with a number of external and internal factors from the finance space to, weather, everything, there's so many things that can influence risk. That is an ever changing model that, I think we're very confident in that it is strong, but it is an ever evolving process, which again makes, for a marketer, your ICP ever changing. It just makes it that much more challenging, but a lot of fun.
Hmm. And speaking of, have you heard of any situations where there are certain types of brands that might not be a good fit for such kind of funding, or might not be a good fit for Kick Further? Have you come across any situations like that?
Yeah, we have. So, just as a part of the requirements for the brands that we support, number one, there's a minimum trailing 12-month revenue point that we look at. We target brands anywhere from roughly about $500,000 in trailing 12-month revenue up to about 10 to 15 million. And we found that our sweet spot is right there between that roughly 1 to 5 million, maybe 1 to 10 million space. And again, that's trailing 12 months of revenue, right?
Mhm.
Not the prediction. So that's one kind of qualifier, which will eliminate a significant portion of kind of the smaller brands.
Mhm.
The other kind of factors that are kind of requirements in order to get onto the Kickfurther platform are that your product is not a regulated product, so we can't support, drugs, alcohol, marijuana products, etc. And the other element is that the product needs to be a shelf stable. If it is a consumable, it has to be shelf stable for at least 12 months. So our primary ICP is really that CPG consumer grade product that is sold either in retail, in a store, online. There's a direct product, it's shelf stable. So oftentimes we do run into challenges with, food and beverage industry products, for example, that maybe don't have the shelf life of 12 months. And those are, risk factors that we've identified and have learned over the course of time that just don't quite fit our model the best.
Got it. Is there any success story that comes to your mind, which could be a little bit more recent, on how a brand has utilized this and grown along the way?
Sure. I'll spare the name of the brand without having particular permission to use it here. But we were just having a discussion earlier today as a marketing organization of one of our testimonial brands that within the last year has grown 600%. I believe they had a total of 9 or 10 co-ops with us. And when we say co-ops, these are consignment opportunities. And I don't know that I actually described that very specifically. The uniqueness of Kickfurther's model is that it is a consignment model.
Hmm.
So when we provide inventory funding, it is completely off balance sheet. And in fact, we take ownership of the product on the behalf of the brand. And then
Hmm.
in as that brand sells through that product, they pay us back and we essentially consign it back to them.
Nice.
So this is completely non-dilutive. This is not an accounts receivable. It's not an account payable. It is completely sans your balance sheet, and obviously is it makes for our service to be palatable with a number of different existing financial models that a lot of the founder brands that we work with have, right? If you're diluted a bit, or if you have private equity, or if you currently are paying back a bank loan, none of your engagement with Kickfurther will impact that or any future opportunities to kind of go about that. Um, so really the consignment model, I think that is the differentiator, right?
Got it.
And it also makes us agnostic to existing, environments.
Got it. And I think one thing that Kickfurther has done really well, of course, is having a strong partnership ecosystem, investing a lot of time in the education piece of it, like you said, because this consignment model and the way of funding is something that requires some time to understand. And but once you
Certainly.
do it, it gets very obvious. So in the coming months, what is your core focus as the director of marketing? Is there any specific things that you're working on? And along with the changes that would definitely come in the coming months, election, Q4 time of the year for e-commerce, a lot of things going to happen. What's on your mind, and what's in the future?
Yeah, I love the question. So, I think one thing that is core to Kickfurther and that we will never divert from is that this organization was built by founders for founders, and I think one of our focuses, our primary focuses, both for 2024 and really the broader parts of 2025, is to reposition ourselves next to the brands that we're here to support,
Mm.
and that does come to light through education. That does come to light through just kind of participation and being active and participating in opportunities like this where we can just have the conversation and speak the experience we have. We just are happy to celebrate our 10-year anniversary in business, right? And that
300
just
million, if I'm not mistaken, right?
yes, $300 million in co-ops funded, so in inventory funded. So I think just like the amount of data that we've ingested on these different brands, the understanding that we have across the entire supply chain because we've worked with many of these brands, many of the third-party solution providers. I think we are uniquely positioned at kind of the nexus of what CPG looks like now and in the future. It's a lot more mobile. It's a lot more nimble. I think we live kind of at the center of that, and our focus as an organization is to lean into that and share that knowledge. One thing I'm excited, I guess, to give a sneak peek about is that we will be releasing in 2025 a CPG annual report. Here's what we saw in 2024. Here's what some of the founders that we've worked with have been challenged with. Here's what some of the partner brands that support other arms of the supply chain that we've worked with historically. Here's what some of their challenges are. Here's some outlooks as to what we expect in 2025. And ultimately, the positioning is we are your friend in this space.
Mm.
Whether or not you need Kickfurther services for your inventory, we know someone that probably you can work with. Outsource CFOs, right? When is it time to hire? When is it time to grow? All of those things are kind of fundamental to when Kickfurther can support these brands. And I think leaning more into that and sharing that education that we've acquired kind of over the course of 10 years, bumping our heads this way and that way is really a key focus for us going forward.
Nice. That sounds pretty exciting. And thanks for sharing the sneak peek. I think the companies like Kickfurther have a unique perspective on, the typical trends where e-commerce is growing, challenges faced by e-commerce, especially if there is a financial component in the report. I think that will be very useful to for a lot of people, especially in the small to mid-market segment, to understand how things are trending, especially in e-commerce where margins are razor thin. It keeps changing.
Correct.
A monopoly kind of a situation almost in many situations. So I would be pretty looking forward to that report. I hope it's free of cost for.
Free of cost. Free of cost. Yes. Stay tuned to Kickfurther social media and sign up on our newsletter if you have any interest. We will be promoting and getting that out here within the next several months.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Vijay. You've been really, really articulate, and this has been really helpful and hopefully educational. If it helps even one e-commerce brand overcome the hump that they would inevitably face come holiday season, come enormous lead times thanks to the logistics, and even Amazon's warehouse is pretty much backed up for the next 16 weeks. There would be no doubts that even millions of small business or even e-commerce brands would have the working capital tie up, and it's companies like Kickfurther, I think, would come as a godsend for a lot of these brands to not just overcome but have a really, really good alternative to continuously grow, come whatever comes ahead of them.
I would totally agree. If I could just throw one last kind of nugget in there, we tend to operate under the assumption that if you haven't started preparing for Black Friday by now, you are late. Um, the majority of the brands that we work with in preparation for Black Friday, understanding that it's some of their highest selling months, we tend to see kind of preparation, consignments, manufacturing, et cetera, start to take place in the back half of Q2.
Wow.
Um, a lot of times we'll see things in Q3, but the idea is we want to invest the working capital that we have now for our highest selling months, so that when we are selling through these products that we just had manufactured in Q2, we still have working capital to promote which, right? This is generally the highest spending month for marketing departments, because this is usually our biggest month. This is the month that brings us into the black, right? We were in the red until Black Friday. I recently learned that's why it's called Black Friday. But we were in red all year until Black Friday, and then we got into the black. In order to do so, we need to be able to have a strong go-to-market strategy, and we need to have ample budget to deliver. And that is why Kickfurther, again, comes in very early in the process to get the product on shelf, and now we promote it here in Q4. We're happy to chat as well, whether or not folks are interested in using the consignment model or working with Kickfurther. We just love to have the conversation with the space. We are ever involved and would just love to chat.
Nice. And yeah, I would highly encourage brands to do that. All right. Thanks a lot, BJ, for your time. You've been really kind.
Akil, thank you so much for having us, and I look forward to being in touch again soon.
All right.